And this illustrates one of the issues with a lot of modern or contemporary sort of Egyptology, which is that the writing is the bedrock of Egyptology. Once we translated hieroglyphs, that the Rosetta Stone, and we were able to sort of start to translate, and that's been a huge science. It's wonderful, actually. It becomes the bedrock of how we date and relate objects and artifacts, because it's whatever was written on them. It's not the only way, but whatever's written on these things becomes the primary methodology for how we date them. So if it is written on them, so you have the name of a guy on an artifact, it's just like, well, the inference is therefore that he probably had this thing made for him, and therefore he might have even made the whole site. It's not the only method that's used, but it is a primary one. It's probably the first one they'd go to for dating stuff. And what's interesting, even on this box here, is one of the other issues with this idea is that you actually have an empty Shen ring on this box, or a cartouche, which doesn't have a name in it. So it's all carved up, and there's an empty Shen ring in here, and all you have to do is imagine that there's the name of a pharaoh in this Shen ring, and then the history books would say that it was this guy that made this box and probably this whole site, and that's how the whole story of it, that's what ends up in a history textbook.
Yeah.
But it's empty, and we don't know whose name was going in here. I suspect it was whoever was going to pay the priests that ran the place the most, because this box was probably being sold for dedication. Right? This is the priests ran this site. We know there were all over the Serapeum. There's there's little indentations on the walls that have, there were these little limestone or granite steles that you would put in there and have a dedication to yourself, and this was a service was being sold by the priests that were running the place.
Right.
It's one of the issues with it, and it goes further. Once you start to see this dichotomy of technology between the artifacts themselves and the writing, you start to see it in a lot of places, and this is a great example I like to show people.
Incredible.
Yeah, it's a Hyksos Sphinx. But you can see that the ribs are kind of being shown up by just the light almost is being used, to the reflection, to show that the rib line on this thing. But then you take a close look at the hieroglyphs, and they're just crudely chiseled. Like it's, you see the hammer marks, you see the fact that it's done by hand. And here's another key indicator for me: the hieroglyphs are never polished. Right, so the rest of the stone is polished, and there's obviously, it's not all flat surfaces and easy polishing. There's lots of interesting and tight sort of parts of the stonework that were polished, but the hieroglyphs are never polished. So, for example, if you look at some of these incredible statues that come from the Old Kingdom, you have the top of the chest, the clavicle here is all beautifully done. You have the fingernails, the cuticles, the insides of the fingernails.
Right,
all of that stonework's polished, right? This isn't flat surfaces. So they were capable of polishing stone. Whoever built this statue could polish stone in whatever form they wanted to. There's dust all over this statue, but it is polished. And, you get these beautiful examples of knees. Like, this is one of the best knees in... this is in granodiorite, not for nothing, but incredible musculature and bone structure.
Granite diorite?
Granodiorite.
Granodiorite. How hard is that stone?
Slightly harder than granite. It's like a mixture between granite and diorite.
And what is the hardest stone on Earth?
Diamond.
And diorite's how far?
Diorite's like a 7.5. So diamond's a 10 on the Mohs scale of hardness. Things like hardened steel might be a 6.5, and granite can be a 6.5 to a 7. Some are diorite and flint, and some of the other harder stones, either porphyry or dolerite can go up to like 7.5, 8.
Okay.
Corundum, topaz, things like this are a 9, and we have artifacts made from things like corundum that they were shaping with a 9. I mean, and copper and bronze are like 3 and 4. These are extreme. Marble's like a 3. Calcite's like a 3. This is why a lot of sculpture's done in marble these days.
So the statue of David, is that marble?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, marble. It's much, much, much softer than this stuff. Like, incredibly. Yeah, if you're a modern sculptor, you ain't working in granite just because. Like, it's not a good choice. Like, you're going to burn your tools out. It's going to be a nightmare. And modern sculptors will know this. But the point is that, again, even with decent hieroglyphs like this, it's not polished, right? Even in the good hieroglyphs that are on the side of this statue, like this, the interior of the bird, not polished. The Shen ring around that the king's cartouche there, not straight and not polished. The lotus flower motif below it is polished. Like, so it's like when this was done with a different technology, potentially done at an entirely different time. So it's difficult to say then that the writing is how we can date and relate this artifact into the story of history. It's entirely possible that this was inherited, we don't know how old it is, and then somebody wrote their name on it later and claimed it. And in fact, we have evidence of that very thing. In fact, here's one more good example of the polish. I like this shot because it shows you the polished stone, and then you can see the chisel marks. This is all this these hieroglyphs. They're good, but they're all done by hand. And we know that the practice of writings of somebody usurping an artifact, Flinders Petrie called Ramses II the Great Usurper. He's one of the people think about him as one of the most powerful kings of ancient Egypt. But he was notorious for writing his name on stuff. This is an example here I can show you real quick. It's like that's the cartouche of Ramses II right here. This big guy here. It's carved in very deeply into. And I actually love this photograph. He's carved it deeply into what is a reused section of an obelisk. But look closely at the end here.
Oh, yeah, that bird?
He's carving over the top of a pre-existing inscription. So you can see it here where he's blending in. They got quite good at like writing over the top and like blending in his stuff into a pre-existing inscription.
Oh, wow.
And I mean, there's artifacts with 2 or 3 or 4 even different pharaohs' names on them. And Ramses became notorious. He would carve his stuff really deeply because he didn't want other people doing to him what he was doing to others. But what I love about this particular picture is you're actually looking at 2 or 3 different reuses of a particular artifact, right? So this piece of stone was originally probably part of an obelisk, right? It's a broken piece of an obelisk. They had a place called Tanis, which is literally was forested with obelisks and columns. And if you've seen obelisks, the ones that have writing on them, the writing's vertical, right? It's not horizontal. It's vertical.
Yes, when the obelisk is standing up.
Right?
Yeah.
So the writing on so this isn't original writing. So not only did this obelisk break,
this thing was originally standing up vertically.
Yeah, it's a piece of an obelisk, most likely.
Yeah.
And so it was and they were reused. There's even like these walls that they built at Tanis. I mean, there's a foot from a 1,000-ton statue that's been repurposed into a block in a wall. So they were reusing broken pieces of stones in walls. So not only did they reused it once as a block in a wall, then someone wrote something on it the first time, and then later on, who knows how long later, Ramses II comes along and writes over it again. So this thing's been inherited, renovated, and reused like 2 or 3 different times, and it's written on horizontally. So,
and all the vertical obelisks are written on vertically.
The ones that have writing on them, yes. So it's hard to say, how can you take this cartouche and say, well, Ramses had this block of stone quarried and shipped to the side and we don't know that. You can't date the stonework. So it's a great example of inheritance and reuse.